doctor in a small English town killed at least 215 of his own patients. He did it over 23 years, in their own homes, in the afternoon. Every death certificate was filled in correctly. Every form was countersigned. The police investigated and found nothing wrong, because the man who signed the certificates was the man holding the syringe. His name was Harold Shipman. The town was Hyde in Greater Manchester. In 1998, a taxi driver there named John Shaw sat down with a piece of paper and started writing names. They were all his passengers. They were all elderly women. They were all dead. He counted 21. He had spent years driving these women to their appointments, to the shops, to their friends' houses. He knew their kitchens. He knew their birthdays. And one by one, over the same few years, they had died at home, in their armchairs, fully dressed, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. Shaw did not know what to do with the list. Who would believe a cab driver? Think about what a doctor actually is to you. Not the medicine, the permission. You let this person into your house. You let them touch you. You roll up your sleeve without asking what is in the syringe. You tell them things you would never say to your own family. And when they say the words "it was her heart," you write it down as fact and you start planning the funeral. That permission is not stupidity. It is one of the oldest and most useful instincts your species has. But it has a shape, and Harold Shipman found the shape and lived inside it for 23 years. Shipman qualified as a doctor at Leeds in 1970. He was, by every account, excellent. Patients adored him. He made house calls when other doctors would not. He remembered your grandchildren's names. He sat at bedsides. In 1996, a local newspaper photographed him because he had helped raise money for equipment at the local hospital. He was also stealing pethidine from his own practice by 1975, forging prescriptions in patients' names. He was caught. He was fined £600 and sent to a drug rehabilitation clinic in York. Then he was allowed to practice medicine again. Nobody told his future patients. By 1977, he was in Hyde. By 1993, he had his own surgery on Market Street with around 3,000 patients on his list, most of them elderly, most of them women, most of them living alone. Here is what he did, and it is almost unbearably simple. He would visit an elderly patient at home, usually alone, usually in the afternoon. He carried diamorphine, which is medical heroin. He injected a lethal dose. He waited. Then he either left, or he telephoned for help he knew would arrive too late, or he told a relative he had already called an ambulance, and then canceled it. Then he wrote the death certificate himself. That last part is the whole crime. In Britain at the time, a doctor could certify the cause of death of his own patient. If the death seemed natural and the doctor was not surprised by it, there was no coroner, no postmortem, no second opinion, and Shipman was never surprised. He had usually written a note in the records weeks earlier describing chest pain or dizziness that the patient never had. The paperwork agreed with him, because he had written the paperwork. So ask yourself the question the town could not answer. If the person who kills you is also the person who decides why you died, who is left to notice? The answer, it turned out, was other people who filled out forms. In March 1998, Dr. Susan Booth, a local doctor whose job included countersigning cremation forms, noticed something. Shipman's patients kept dying. They kept dying at home. They kept dying with him present, or just after he left. The pattern was in the forms themselves. She raised it with a colleague, Dr. Linda Reynolds of the Brook Surgery, and Reynolds took it to the coroner. The police looked. The police found nothing. They looked at his medical records, which he had written, and the records said everything was fine. The investigation was closed in April 1998. In that gap, before anyone came back, at least 3 more women died. What broke it was not medicine, it was money. On the 24th of June 1998, Shipman visited Kathleen Grundy, an 81-year-old former mayor of Hyde. She was fit, active, and popular. She was found dead at home that same day. Shipman certified old age. Then a will appeared. It was badly typed, badly spelled, and it left almost £400,000 to Harold Shipman. Grundy's daughter, Angela Woodruff, was a solicitor. She had drawn up her mother's real will herself. She looked at this document and knew immediately that it was a forgery, because it was a bad one. She went to the police. Kathleen Grundy's body was exhumed in August 1998. Toxicology found morphine. Shipman had no reason on earth to have given her morphine, and he could not explain it. Then investigators did something that had never occurred to anyone before. They examined his computer. Shipman had used a medical record system that time-stamped every entry. He had been backdating symptoms into patient files, inventing histories of illness after those patients were already dead. The audit trail recorded every single alteration and the exact minute he made it. The man's own alibi, written in his own hand, was carrying a timestamp that said he wrote it too late. He was arrested in September 1998. In January 2000, he was convicted of 15 murders and 1 count of forgery and sentenced to 15 life terms. The public inquiry that followed, led by Dame Janet Smith, examined every death he had ever certified. Her report concluded he had killed at least 215 people and considered it likely the true figure was around 250. The earliest confirmed victim died in 1975. He had been doing it on and off for 23 years. He never confessed, not once to anyone. He hanged himself in Wakefield Prison in January 2004, the day before his 58th birthday. Now here is the part that should bother you, because it is not about him. Every single safeguard that existed worked exactly as designed. The death certificates were filled incorrectly. The cremation forms were countersigned. The police investigated when concerns were raised. The medical records were complete and detailed. Nothing malfunctioned. The system was not built to catch a doctor. It was built assuming a doctor. Your instinct to trust a person in a role is not a bug in your brain. Humans are the only animal that routinely hands its life to a stranger on the basis of a credential, and that single habit is why you have surgery, aeroplanes, and clean water. Cooperation at that scale requires you to stop verifying. You cannot personally audit the pilot. But the same instinct that lets a society function is the exact instinct that makes it blind in one specific place. You do not check the person who is supposed to do the checking. And so the safest place for a predator to stand has never been in the dark. It is inside the role that makes people stop looking. Britain changed the law because of him. Death certification now requires an independent medical examiner. Cremation forms were overhauled. Controlled drug records were tightened. Every one of those changes exists because 200 families in one small town were told a lie by a man in a cardigan who genuinely did remember their grandchildren's names. John Shaw, the taxi driver, eventually gave his list to the police. He had been right about nearly all of them. He said afterwards that the hardest part was not the suspicion. It was that he kept driving. Because what do you do with a thought that big and no proof at all? In a town where everyone loves the doctor. A doctor in a small English town killed at least 215 of his own patients. Not one of them died because they trusted a stranger. Every single one died because they trusted the man everybody trusted.